Long before stock exchanges flashed numbers on screens before, Rome learned how to tax an empire before the world ever spoke about globalization as an idea. There was a civilization that grasped a truth most powers would spend centuries discovering. Empires are not held together by armies alone. They are held together by systems. Quiet, invisible systems that decide who pays, who profits, and who survives. And the Achaemenid Persians didn't stumble into this reality. They engineered it deliberately, transforming money into a tool of control more reliable than walls, legions, or fear. Welcome to Capital Decode, where history isn't remembered for its myths, but dissected for its mechanisms. When Persia is mentioned, the image is usually visual. Vast territories, ornate palaces, disciplined soldiers stretching from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. But those images distract from what truly sustained the empire. Beneath the armies and architecture was an economic framework so advanced that its logic still governs the modern world. Taxation systems, standardized currency, administrative regions, central treasuries. Today, these ideas feel inevitable, like features of civilization itself. But they weren't born in Europe, they weren't perfected in Rome, and they didn't originate in the modern age. They were forged in Persia. This was the first empire to understand that ruling land is temporary, but ruling financial flows is permanent. And once that system was built, power no longer needed to shout. It simply moved quietly through gold roads, ledgers, shaping the ancient world in ways we're still living with today. Every empire eventually confronts the same dilemma, no matter the century or the flag flying above its cities. Expansion is easy compared to integration. Conquest can happen in months. Control takes generations. The Persians learned this lesson early, not through theory, but through near failure. By the middle of the 6th century BCE, the Persian world had exploded outward at a speed history had never seen before. Under Cyrus II, later remembered as Cyrus the Great, territory after territory fell into Persian hands. Media, Lydia, Babylon, names that represented entire civilizations, not just cities. What emerged was not merely a kingdom, but the largest political entity the world had yet known. Nearly 2/5 of humanity lived under a single crown. No ruler before Cyrus had ever managed something of that scale. But scale creates friction, and friction exposes weakness. Each region Cyrus absorbed operated according to its own internal logic. Babylon's economy revolved around grain and temple storage. Lydia relied on metal coinage. Egypt measured wealth in agricultural yield and labor obligations. Elsewhere, tribute came in livestock, textiles, or raw materials. These systems worked locally, refined over centuries to suit geography and culture, but stitched together into one empire, they formed a financial nightmare. There was no universal measure of value. No standardized method of taxation, no reliable way to calculate imperial income, let alone plan long-term expenditures. Revenue arrived late, incomplete, or not at all. Governors interpreted obligations creatively. Records were inconsistent. Resources vanished between the provinces and the capital. The empire looked solid from the outside, but internally it ran on improvisation. Cyrus ruled with unusual tolerance for his era. He allowed local customs to remain intact and resisted forced uniformity. That restraint earned loyalty, but it also limited administrative coherence. His system survived, but only just. It depended on personal authority rather than institutional discipline. And history shows that systems built around individuals rarely outlive them. When Cyrus died, the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Corruption spread through provincial administrations. Tribute shrank without explanation. Border regions began operating as semi-independent economies. Communication lagged behind events. Decisions were made in the dark. The empire was growing faster than its ability to measure itself, a condition that has destroyed states far more technologically advanced. Persia needed more than armies. It needed a method. That method arrived with Darius. Darius did not expand the empire dramatically. Instead, he stabilized it. His genius lay not in conquest, but in organization. Where earlier kings ruled through relationships and precedent, Darius ruled through structure. He recognized that power could not rest on loyalty alone. It required accounting. His first decisive move was administrative. The empire was divided into clearly defined regions, later known as satrapies. This was not simply a redrawing of borders. Each satrapy was evaluated systematically: population, productive output, trade capacity. From this data came fixed obligations. Taxes were no longer negotiated or symbolic. They were assessed. For the first time, an empire knew in advance what it would collect. This change cannot be overstated. Predictable revenue transforms governance. It allows planning instead of reaction. It limits corruption by narrowing discretion, converts rule from performance into process. Farmers, merchants, and officials now operated inside a system that measured them consistently year after year. It was bureaucracy at scale, and it worked. But taxation alone could not unify an empire fractured by dozens of economic languages. Darius understood that trust, not force, was the foundation of economic order, and trust required a common standard. Without it, even the most disciplined administration would fracture under confusion. But Darius made his boldest move yet, one that would echo through history. He gave the empire a single financial voice. The introduction of a standardized currency changed the Persian Empire in ways no army ever could. With the minting of the gold daric and its silver counterpart, the empire gained something rare in the ancient world: financial credibility. The daric was not remarkable because it existed. Coins had circulated before Persia. What made it revolutionary was consistency. Its weight was fixed. Its purity was exceptionally high. Its acceptance was enforced not through coercion but through reliability. The coin meant the same thing in Anatolia as it did in Egypt, the same in Mesopotamia as it did near the Indus. Money became predictable, and predictability creates trust. With a shared currency, trade accelerated. Merchants no longer navigated endless conversions or barter systems. Soldiers could be paid in a medium accepted everywhere they marched. Taxes could be assessed, collected, and stored in a uniform unit of value. The empire gained liquidity, the ability to move wealth efficiently across distance. That liquidity became power. Even Persia's rivals recognized it. Greek city-states, often hostile to Persian authority, still accepted darics in commerce. The coin crossed political boundaries because it crossed economic ones. In practical terms, Persia had created the ancient world's closest equivalent to a reserve currency. Influence no longer depended solely on territory. It flowed through trust. But money that cannot move is trapped potential. Darius understood this as well. An empire stretched across continents requires speed, not just for armies, but for information, orders, and resources. Without rapid circulation, even the best systems stagnate. The solution was infrastructure. The royal road was not simply a road, it was an artery. Spanning thousands of kilometers, it linked the imperial core to its farthest provinces. Relay stations allowed messages and materials to move with astonishing efficiency. What once took months could now take days. This transformed governance. Taxes reached the treasury on time. Orders reached governors before crises escalated. Intelligence moved faster than rebellion. The empire became responsive, a quality far rarer than strength. Behind the scenes, the Persian treasuries expanded. Gold and silver accumulated not as decoration, but as reserves. These stores were deliberately centralized and carefully guarded. They served multiple functions: financing campaigns, stabilizing regions after disasters, rewarding loyalty, and discouraging defiance. Wealth in Persia was not a symbol. It was a buffer. Crucially, this system altered incentives. Governors were monitored financially. Loyalty was rewarded materially. Corruption carried consequences. Local elites were integrated through loans, contracts, and subsidies rather than eradicated. Temples were incorporated into state finance instead of standing apart from it. Persia did not erase differences, it aligned them. The result was an empire governed less by fear than by calculation. Diversity remained, but it operated inside a shared framework. Economic behavior became legible to the state, and legibility is the foundation of control. This was not accidental, it was design. When later civilizations encountered Persian administration, they noticed something unsettling. The system worked. It did not rely on charisma or constant warfare. It functioned quietly day after day, even when rulers changed. That was its greatest strength and its most underestimated legacy. Persia's financial architecture outlived Persian dominance. When the empire receded, its ideas remained. Conquerors borrowed them, administrators copied them. Rivals quietly adopted the logic while publicly dismissing the culture. The Greeks criticized Persian excess, yet absorbed its monetary practices. The Romans defeated Persian territories, then implemented provincial taxation models, strikingly familiar in structure. Standardized revenue, centralized treasuries, administrative regions. These were not Roman inventions.
Wow.
They were Persian inheritances. And the pattern did not stop in antiquity. Strip away ancient terminology and the parallels become uncomfortable. Satrapies resemble modern states and provinces. The derrick mirrors today's reserve currencies. The royal road has become digital infrastructure cables, shipping routes, satellites. Treasuries have evolved into sovereign wealth funds and currency reserves. The logic has not changed. Power follows financial coherence. States that can measure, move, and protect resources endure. Those that cannot, regardless of military strength, decay from within. History is consistent on this point. The Achaemenids understood crisis management long before it had a name. They prepared for disruption in advance. When war erupted or famine struck, reserves were deployed deliberately. Stability was purchased with foresight. Modern states often reverse this logic. Debt replaces reserves. Short-term politics override long-term discipline. Infrastructure decays while rhetoric expands. Currency stability becomes negotiable. The same vulnerabilities Persia guarded against have returned amplified by scale. Even Persia was not immune. Over time, later kings drifted from the system that sustained their power. Administrative discipline weakened. Provincial autonomy expanded unchecked. Corruption returned. Reserves were misused. The architecture remained, but respect for it faded. When Alexander arrived, Persia did not fall because its model failed. It fell because it stopped honoring its own rules. This is the final lesson, and the most difficult one. No system, however brilliant, survives neglect. Financial order demands constant maintenance. When clarity dissolves, collapse follows. Not suddenly, but inevitably. Empires do not die on battlefields, they die in ledgers. So what should we take from all of this? It's this: the principles the Persian Empire uncovered over 2,500 years ago didn't vanish with their palaces. They didn't age out of relevance. They became rules, the kind that quietly govern every system that survives pressure. These aren't ancient curiosities, they're structural truths. Whether you're leading a nation, building a company, or trying to gain control over your own future, the fundamentals don't change. Know what you can measure. Simplify what creates friction. Design systems that don't collapse the moment stress appears. Plan for disruption before it forces your hand. And most importantly, understand that clarity, not chaos, is what creates lasting power. History doesn't repeat itself in obvious ways. It rhymes in patterns most people ignore until it's too late. If this story sharpened the way you see the world, consider subscribing. The past isn't behind us, it's beneath us, shaping everything we stand on. And here, we uncover it piece by piece.